Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. I am excited to share this video with you today. Last week I shared trying Maria Emmerich's new easiest egg white bread recipe where you only use egg white powder and you add equal amount of water plus the other ingredients and you don't have to use fresh egg whites. And if you watch that video, you know that I immediately started experimenting with it in order to get a little bit better of a texture. I have loved the texture that I get when using whole egg powder in my breads. And if you saw that video, you know that that was a fail. I used 40 grams of the whole egg powder in that recipe and the texture was just super weird. And I had almost given up, but then I was like, why don't I just try it again with less of the whole egg powder? Because the whole egg powder gives it those bubbles, but it was too much. It gave it too much bubbles. So I decided to reduce the amount of whole egg powder that I used in the recipe, and oh my goodness, it turned out incredible. I've been up since 6 a.m. this morning baking loaf after loaf after loaf of bread, just testing out little tiny variables to make sure that I have this just right for you guys, but I'm so excited to share this recipe. I loved the original from Maria. I loved how easy it was. I loved that it didn't get my mixer as dirty, and I loved that you didn't have to let the bread sit in the oven for 30 minutes after you turn the oven off. But the things that I didn't love about the recipe were the texture. When you whip up the egg white powder from the beginning, it gives it a really, really fine bubble texture, and it's more like a memory foam. That's what I like to describe it as. It's like a memory foam texture. It's not terrible, but it's just not as bread-like as I would hope for. And then also with the original recipe, you get the super misshapen loaves and the sides can sink in, and it's just those crazy looking loaf shapes. So I figured if I can improve the texture and get more of like a uniform loaf shape so the slices looked more like slices of bread, it would be a win. And I think with this recipe tweak, I have done that. So let's go ahead and head into the kitchen and I'll show you what I've come up with. Here is my pile of test loaves that I have been working on this morning, but look at the texture of this, if my camera will focus. It looks so much more like regular bread to me. It's got some little bit bigger bubbles, but it's still nice and soft. This, I think, is the closest to perfection as far as egg white bread goes that I have found so far. And then look at how the sides don't sink in. The bottom, it's perfectly shaped. It looks so much like just a loaf of bread. I've made a couple different sizes, my giant loaf pan and then my mini loaf pans, and they both turned out great. First, I'm gonna preheat my oven to 325, and I have my large bread pan here ready to go, lined with parchment paper. I have stopped spraying my pans as long as I line them with parchment paper, and it works great. So the base of this recipe is just the same as Maria's easiest egg white bread recipe, which of course I will link down below. I'm gonna use 1.5 cups of the egg white powder, and I measure that by grams. 1.5 cups comes out to 120 grams. I'm gonna use 1/4 cup of allulose, 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar, and 1/2 teaspoon of Redmond real salt, and 1.5 cups of water. And then at the end, I will mix in the whole egg powder, which is my secret ingredient that has really perfected the bread for me. So first I'm adding in my 120 grams of egg white protein powder. And this one just happens to be the Bulk Supplements brand. I've used lots of brands, and they're all slightly different, but not enough to make a huge difference in the recipes. 120 grams. 1/4 cup of allulose, 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar, 1/2 teaspoon of Redmond real salt. And I'm just gonna turn this on level 1 to get the powders a little bit mixed up before I add in my water. I'm slowly adding in my 1.5 cups of water, and then I will increase the speed gradually until I get to full speed and then set a timer for 5 minutes. It's been 5 minutes, and now I am going to add in my whole egg powder. And the amount that I'm adding in is 20 grams. And the whole egg powder can be a little bit clumpy, so I'm going to turn my mixer onto level 2 and slowly add in the whole egg powder, like a little spoonful at a time, just to get it all mixed in well. And for those of you without a kitchen scale, 20 grams of the whole egg powder is about 3 tablespoons. Scraping the sides, making sure I don't have any powder still left. I love how the batter is softer, makes it easier to spread in the pan, and it doesn't ball up and get my mixer quite as messy. I'm gonna give it a real quick mix with the spatula just to make sure that everything down there at the bottom is all mixed thoroughly. Now into the pan. My oven is just preheated, so that's perfect. I do like how this batter kind of pours a little bit more easily. It's softer, and so you don't have to shape it quite as much. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but we have a frog that lives under our porch, and it's a very loud frog. And I've heard it on a couple of videos when I was editing. Made me laugh. It's also raining, so you might hear the rain on the roof as well. Into the oven this goes, and the cook time for this is different than the original recipe. It is 40 minutes at 325. I went ahead and mixed up another batch because it's so easy to mix up, so quick, and it's so fun. I'm kind of addicted now. So I wanted to make some more mini loaves to show you guys. The cook time on these I think was 30 minutes, but I'll time it to make sure. 40 minutes for the big loaf, 30 to 35 minutes for the mini loaves. And I love that I can just throw them right in with the other bread that's in here, because I don't have to worry about that 30-minute cooling time in the oven. They can just all cook together. Love it. Big loaf is done. It looks so beautiful. I'm gonna let this cool here for about 15 minutes before I take it out of the pan and let it cool the rest of the way. These mini loaves cooked for 33 minutes and they're looking perfect. So I'm gonna pull them out and let them cool a little bit in the pan before I pull them out to cool the rest of the way. All right, this one's ready to pull out of the pan. I absolutely love how the sides on this bread does not sink in. Bottom is just such a beautiful rectangle. It just looks like a loaf of bread. Makes me so happy. It's still a little bit warm, so I'm gonna put it back on the rack to cool for a few more minutes. And these, since they're smaller, they cool faster. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull them out as well. I'm loving these little tiny aluminum loaf pans. I've had some small ones that were silicone, but I felt like my bread got too browned in the silicone, and I liked the way it came out of the aluminum, so I found some that are just like half the size of my big ones. I'll link those down below if anybody's interested, but they just make the cutest little loaves. And I love this size for my breakfast sandwiches because that's about the size of the sausage that goes on there, and it just comes out perfectly. So cute and perfect. So I weighed one of the large loaves and it was exactly 1 pound, which is kind of nice for figuring out calories and macros and all that. And for those of you that like to do protein sparing modified fast or lean days and you want it to still be low fat, thankfully this is still very low fat. There is, if you cut it into 16 slices, which would be 1 ounce per slice, then it's half a gram of fat per slice. So that's still very, very low and very easy to budget if you're doing any kind of a leaner day. And then of course, if you're doing a regular keto day or a higher fat day, you just slather butter on it and you got a nice high fat, high protein snack. So look at the texture of that bread. It just looks so much like the texture of regular bread. No memory foam. I'm so excited about that. Slicing up one of these mini loaves here so I can show you these adorable bread slices. Of course, this is just half the recipe, so one of these loaves would weigh a half of a pound or 8 ounces. I don't know how many slices it's gonna make. I'll count them here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. So I got 13 little mini slices out of that one. Aren't those cute? I just love it. So I wanted to show you a little comparison of some of my experiments. This is a loaf where I tried exactly the way I showed you, but I did 40 grams of the whole egg powder. And you see how it got really big bubbles, and the texture of everything else is kind of eggy. It's not great. It does make really good French toast though. And then this one's actually really good too. This one was 30 grams of the whole egg powder. And this one is not bad at all. It's got a little bit bigger of holes, but the taste is still really good. But I think my favorite was the one that I showed you with the 20 grams of whole egg powder. It's got some bigger holes, but it's also really soft. Doesn't taste eggy like this one did. And I think this one is gonna be my go-to, 20 grams of whole egg powder. But I was gonna say, if you try 20 grams of the whole egg powder and you think it's too dry, you could try upping it to the 30 grams and see if you like that a little bit better. With this bread, of course, it is always about your own personal preference. Everyone finds the way that they like it, and it's not always the same. So I definitely encourage experimenting with different ratios and just finding what you like. I wanted to throw in here too that I know some of you guys are thinking, what if you just added whole eggs in the same proportion as the whole egg powder, and would that work the same? The answer is unequivocally no. I tried it because I had that exact same thought, and it'd be so much easier just to throw in a couple whole eggs rather than buy the whole egg powder, but it did not work at all. It was a pretty big fail. And actually I did a video where I did that and some other experimenting before I perfected the recipe. And since I perfected the recipe, I was too excited to go ahead and film that version. So I don't know if I will post the other one, but with the whole eggs, it still had the memory foam texture and the sides sunk in so bad. It was kind of hilarious looking. So that was definitely a fail. And I even tried adjusting the liquid in the recipe down because the whole eggs of course would add some liquid. Still didn't get anywhere near the effect that the whole egg powder did. I am super thrilled about how this recipe turned out, and I think it's gonna be my new go-to, and I will be doing more videos using this recipe for buns and hot pockets and different things like that, so you can look for that coming soon. I will put all the details of the recipe down in the description below, as well as the macros for those of you who are interested in that. And there will also be a link to my Amazon store where I link everything that I use for egg bread making, so if there's any ingredients or pans or anything like that from the video, you can follow that link and just find a whole list of everything. Thanks so much for coming along with me on this egg bread adventure. I hope you guys are all doing really great, and I'll see you in the next video. Well, it looks like we're stocked up on egg white bread for the next month or so.